Everyone always talks about romantic relationship breakups, but very seldomly do I hear people talk about when it's family and when it's friends, all of which can have you in emotional turmoil between your head and your heart. And everything in between can feel topsy turvy and upside down, leaving you confused, empty, and sometimes completely lost. So I want to talk about that. Welcome to the Michael Experience Podcast. I am your orator and originator, Michael, and these are my thoughts, my life, my way. All right. So I want to talk about this breakup situation because no one ever talks about the friends and the family that you have to break up with when you are on your journey of becoming who you are meant to be and releasing the people who are not meant to be in that. Relative to my book, One Day at a Time, which I have been hinting in all of our conversations, but One Day at a Time is available soon to everybody out there. The ebook is on pre-sale right now, as well as the paperback book on the michaelexperience.com. So go over there and pre-sale your copies now. And if we are beyond the date that this airs, make sure you purchase yours. You can purchase at the michaelexperience.com and also on Amazon and Kindle. So when I wrote One Day at a Time, I started the book with those breakups because I wanted to give honor to all of the relationship situations that had taken place in my life. So, for instance, I talked about the lover of 5 years that we broke up after I found out what happened. But I also talk about a friendship, which was my longest existing friendship or relationship with somebody. And so I talk about that situation at the opening of the book because it really shaped how I was to move forward with people in my life, with friends in my life, particularly the men in my life, because that just seems to be a sore spot always. So I want to talk to you about that. So, without getting into a lot about the friend, because that's not even the focal point of the story, but for context, we were friends for about 17 years, and we did kind of have a moment somewhere between year 2 and 3 of our friendship, and I thought that we could move past that and just have a what I would consider a regular friendship and return back to what we had before. Now, unbeknownst to me, because I've never been in a situation, or at the time I had never been through a situation like that where I crossed the line with somebody that was a friend, and then we tried to remain friends afterward. I hadn't done that before. So I was naive to the fact that we could just go back to being the bestest of friends that we were. But I couldn't have been more wrong. And I talk about that in the book opening because it was a relationship thing that really jarred me even now as I'm moving, towards 40s, towards my 40s as I'm almost 40. But it even now at this age, I'm still rediscovering things about that relationship and what it taught me relative to other relationships I've had. So I learned through that process that I have to let people go. I have to learn to let people go. Right. And it seems like an easier thing to say, and some people are easy to do, but it's not hard. It's harder than we think, right? And it's harder because there's so many feelings involved. There are so many moments that we've shared with each other. There's so many times that we leaned on each other for emotional comfort and emotional support, and that doesn't go away just because the person makes you upset or they are upset with you or the person cuts you off. It doesn't go away. And so you really have to figure out, how do I live right without those feelings, right? And the only way to get through those feelings and get through them is to go through them. And so I had to go through 17 years of sifting to really figure out why that particular relationship meant so much to me and what are the reasons that I kept holding on to it. And to be honest with you all, in the book I talk about this, but I realized that the relationship in its entirety should have ended a long time ago. People come into your life for a number of reasons, right? Could be any number of reasons, but they're not necessarily meant to stay there. And feelings and emotions and history will have us wanting to save a relationship, keep a relationship with somebody because it's the thing that we were taught. Have long lasting relationships. And of course, you want long lasting relationships and friendships of all kinds. Of course, you do. But sometimes that is just not the intention. We all have a purpose to fulfill in this life. And oftentimes, the people that are around us are not meant to be there at every stage. And that is okay. And I often talk about it doesn't make because somebody is no longer in your life or can't be in your life or you have to oust them after they've ousted you or whatever the case may be, right? Because sometimes people will unfriend us, and but we haven't unfriended them and stuff like that, and vice versa, and all the things. And so I had to get real clear on the 17 years that I spent in relationship with this person and what that exchange looked like throughout the entire journey. And what I found was that for me, a consistent theme in my relationships with men had been trying to make them work, even though it just wasn't. Right. Some people didn't treat me well. Some people weaponized, one or two things about something I said or I did inadvertently to hurt them. And then they took that and just let all out war, happen against me. And I was just like, oh, wow, this is crazy. Right. But at the end of the day, I found myself at the center of sifting and saying, why do I keep trying to save these relationships with people? Why? And I do, for whatever reason, well, I did, but for a long time, I believed that people wanted to do good and that people wanted to be in your space and that these occurrences were happening because, we were all just trying to figure out life, is what I told myself, instead of accepting the very real fact that I keep trying to save things with people and they couldn't care less. They could care less. They got what they needed out of the relationship or friendship, whatever you want to call it, and they've moved on to whatever is next. And for whatever reason, I'm sitting here thinking like, "Oh my god, these people can go with me forever. And if there's a way for us to grow together, we will grow together." And there's nothing wrong with me thinking that, but I have to understand that when that's not the case. And so in that friendship and specifically the what do I want to call it? The final breakdown, I realized just how bad I had been holding on to, that relationship could work at some point. And I don't want to say that I sat on it every day like, "Oh my god, I just whatever," but there was always a part of me no matter where I was in the world, and I thought to myself like, what if that was like my lifelong friend? And I've been watching Beaches for as long as I could watch Beaches. The movie is just about as old as I am, and it's one of my favorite movies. And if you've never watched it, go back and watch it. It is Barbara Hershey and Bette Midler, but they are like these friends that have this whirlwind relationship with each other, meeting friendship with each other. And they met on a beach when they were kids, and at the time, technology wasn't what it is today, so they couldn't just pick up the FaceTime. So they stayed in touch all the years, writing letters, keeping each other up on what their happenings were. Hillary, which is played by Barbara, she's this aristocrat who is going to follow in her family's footstep and be a lawyer. And then you have Bette Midler, who is playing, oh my God, how can I not get her name? Bette in the movie is, oh God, this is going to drive me crazy. Anyway, I'll come back to it at a random moment. But Bette Midler plays this very like outlandish kind of big, larger than life character who wants to be an actor and a singer, and she goes on to do those things. But it is going to kill me, you guys, not to be able to do this in this moment. I'm so mad at myself for not knowing this. I should know this. Oh, Bet played. Okay, so Cece Bloom. How did I forget Cece Bloom? Okay, so Cece and Whitney were the best of friends, but from very, very different worlds. One was an aspiring actor and wannabe singer and all those things, big personality. And then there was the friend Hillary, who, like I said, was a rich aristocrat who was going to follow her family steps of being a lawyer and do the family thing. However, life just kept pulling them apart at different points. They started on different sides of the world. They kept in touch through letters and they went years without seeing each other and all of the things. So I'm not going to recap the movie, but I just had to say that because it is one of my favorite movies. I just watched it like 2 weeks ago. I watch it a couple of times a year, I think, like at least 2 or 3 times a year. But I have always wanted my best friend that was going to be the other half, my CC Bloom to my Hillary, or vice versa, whoever could be who or whatever. The part of it that is so emotional and so pivotal for me was that they just kept finding their way back each other until the very end. And I was like, I want that. Now, what I didn't realize when I first started watching the movie was that those series of events were not necessarily healthy in the way that they came out, but of course, as TV. But as life would continue to teach me about my own journeys, one day, one day at a time, I began to unravel my behaviors in that relationship and my interactions and realize how just unhealthy it was. I mean, it was riddled with everything that you can think of in the relationship now that I look back at it. And I don't want to make this about, you know, a hate thing or a negative thing, but there were just things that I should have noticed a long time ago. And there are things about me that I just should have said, this is my opportunity and this is my crossroad where I go to the other side and I have to just say, this is not going to work. But I did not. And so life taught me a very valuable lesson through a series of people. And that was really that I have to let these people go. I have to let them go and not let them come back. That was the other part of not letting them come back. I have this thing because, like I said, I want to believe that everybody wants to be great and that everybody can grow with you on your journey. Well, I did. I don't think that way anymore. And so there would be people that would fall out of my life and I would let them come back. So I can't blame him or the other friends or the men relationships, whatever I had. I can't blame them for coming back. I mean, yeah, they're going to do what they're going to do. I have to blame myself for allowing them to come back and being open and receiving them the same way as I did the first time because it doesn't work. You have to surrender what doesn't work. And so I talk about in the book how I got from wanting these people in my life to saying, okay, I got to let these people go. And so that relationship for me was one that I really had to unpack because it took a lot out of me all of those years. And unraveling that was the almost, I wouldn't say it was the key, but it was a good catalyst to me making sure that I don't do this with any other person in any other type of relationship. So read the book. It opens with that story. It talks about the 5 year relationship that I had as well. And you can really see some of that resolve that I had early on. Of course, now it's been much longer, but the resolve that I displayed in the relationship where I caught him cheating, it really shows you the progression of how I looked at love and how I felt about holding on to people for the sake of holding on to people. So I talk about that, right? So we move from the best friend situation to being in love with somebody and realizing that the person you're in love with cannot go with you on your journey. They cannot go with you on your journey. And here's the thing, even in that, I wanted to believe that that particular lover could. I was like, he can grow with me, we can grow together. He can be him, I could be me, and we're going to be okay. But that was the furthest thing from the truth. I was holding on because I was holding out this hope again that for whatever reason, we could grow and get to the place together and that, everything would be fine and everybody wanted the best and wanted the same. And that's what we were doing. And it doesn't make him a bad person. Again, his life and his journey is his as well as mine. But the thing that we do is we feel like once we have this series of good moments with people that we have to keep them. And in order to keep them, we have to recreate that same thing over and over. But as I say in the book, rarely, scratch that. Never have I seen that work out because I haven't. Typically, it falls apart at some point or another and it ends in some type of catastrophe or some type of negative interaction or ending because neither person had the lens of the truth to say this is not working. We've grown apart and we've been grown apart. We should have never got together. It was great at the beginning, but I forced the relationship or situationship or whatever you have honesty, the lens of honesty would have had either one of us at the time say, this just isn't good for me. This doesn't work for me and it's not working for you. And we have to love each other enough to say, I need to call it quits. So that 17-year friendship, I obviously didn't get it there initially. And, some distance in between the last time we were, around each other physically, just not in a sexual way, but just physically. And coming back, there was just a big gap in there. And so much happened in that time too, in which I got into a relationship with somebody, and this became the relationship with a man that was just so different, right? I believe that lovers are your friend. Your lovers are your friends or should be really good friends to you. There should be best friendship baked in there too. But this man came into my life and just was a very decent, sweet, loving, kind, beautiful human being from the inside out. I had never been treated in a good way, the way that I have been treated with him ever. I hadn't been cared for in the way that I had been cared for with him. He was an amazing lover for me from the day that he set eyes on me and decided that I was the one in that moment, from the very last day, honestly, minus the cheating that I had to find out about later. But even up to the very last moments with us, he continued to be the sweetest human being to me and show me nothing but the love that I and the respect. Well, now the cheating wasn't respectful, but in our daily interactions, the respect that I deserved and I had become used to. And so that in itself, that kind of love, that deep, meaningful kind of love that just changes you without you realizing it, because to be honest, I didn't know I fell in love with him. I had no idea that I had fallen in love with this man. But when I started inventorying that relationship, like I was doing many on this journey, right? Because this journey was really about me coming into alignment with who I'm meant to be. And so you have to, when there's a convergence of past, present, and future, you have to have those jarring experiences, but you also have to be willing to accept things for what they are. And oftentimes they don't look pretty, they don't sound great. They take you so far off course where you thought you would go, or where you wanted to end up or thought you wanted to end up. They take you so far out of that. But it's all a part of this growing process and this becoming process. And again, converging those three things, past, present, future, it can really feel like you are being torn apart from the inside out. It really can. And there's so much coming at you that it can be very heavy. And you just are like, I don't want to do this. I just want to go back to the thing that I know. And I'm just going to stay there. But you can't. You can't. There's no way. When divine alignment comes for you and it calls for you to do the thing that you were sent here to do, you can no longer do the thing where you hide and you play it safe with the other things. You must heed the call. And so this is my moment where I must heed the call. And that comes with taking an emotional inventory of every single situation in my life, every single relationship, acquaintances, colleagues working, friendships, loverships, situationships, every type of interaction that you can think of. You have to take an inventory of it and realize what its meaning was, what its purpose was in guiding you where you were supposed to go, and then how do you settle the differences in between? Because oftentimes what you thought you wanted versus what you actually needed and were intended to do in this world are very, very different and very much so worlds apart. And so for me, I was going through this literally one person at a time, one moment at a time, one day at a time. And it's a lot to unpack when you've been going through life for about 2 decades. And so some things are not going to be important, I learned. There are some people that come in your life and they're just passerbys and they won't mean a whole lot. There are people in my life, they won't mean anything. There's people that I'm sure that I've forgotten in thinking about this book and the one that will come after this. So stay tuned for that. Um, but the ones that really hold weight and significance are the ones that challenge you emotionally when you are not expecting it, right? When you are not expecting it. It's the person that does the thing that is unbelievable or unfathomable in some way. And I'm not saying that in a bad way necessarily, or a good, bad, negative way, because I don't like to do that, but in some ways that don't feel great, but in other ways that feel extremely great and magnificent and maybe miraculous at sometimes. Because there's a situation I talk about in the book too, where I was like, this man, I met him and he was kismet to me. I was like, there is no way that I met somebody at this stage of my life and we are on the same wavelength, like spiritually, kind of emotionally for the most part. And then just when we talked about life, I felt like, oh my goodness. But let me stay on topic here because that's also in the book, but it comes after the story about the lover I was with for 5 years. So let me stay on topic, right? But back to the lover, I had grown to be in love with this man and I didn't even realize it. He's also the one that, through conversation and emotional exchange, made me really begin to think about marriage and what that could mean to me. So I was just in the I want a partner to spend my life with phase. I don't want to be lonely kind of situation. I want there to be love and all this stuff. And yeah, I got a lot of that with him. But where he pushed me out of my comfort zone emotionally was I had to show up for him in much different ways than I had showed up for anybody else. And I was caring about the deep things that were affecting him from his past, to the point where I was willing to work through them in a space and in a pathology where I normally would be like, you make one false move and you are out. I found myself with him being willing to sift through it with him, willing to be patient and come back to it with him because everything was just so heartfelt. And that is depicted in the book as well, where I noticed that his well-being became a big part of how I looked at love and how love should happen or could happen in our relationship, what that exchange would be. And it also made me say very early on, because of our age difference, it made me say, if you choose to love this man this deeply, you have to understand that when it is over, you need to let him go. And when it's time to let him go, you leave in love, right? Meaning that I feel the same way. I feel loving towards him, love for him, the best for him, his overall well being. That's what I meant, leave in love, is that, okay, I didn't want to be angry or upset by whatever happened with us. I was going to leave in love the same way that I came into it, wanting love, giving stuff, receiving love. I was going to send him off the same way. And so I talked about when that relationship ended. Yes, there was a period of me being upset. Of course, I was cheated on, I was betrayed, so of course I felt a certain type of way about that, but once I finally settled those moments, I was able then to say, "You deserve love just like I deserve love, and I want you to go and be happy." And so I talk about how that unraveled, and how that conversation unfolded in the book as well. But I when I left that situation with him, the feeling that I got, the release that I got from having those conversations with him were amazing, because I didn't leave that relationship mad at him. I didn't leave that relationship wanting the worst for him. And I didn't leave it feeling like he wanted the worst for me or he was upset with me at all. We shared emotional exchanges even after, that situation and he went in his other situation. We shared emotional situations with each other and exchanges that just were leave us both leaving in love for each other, right? We didn't mean we had to be in love with each other. For those of you all that are watching me, work through these real emotions and events in real time, you probably can understand what I'm saying. Those of you listening, if you're listening to the changes in my voice, you may get it too. The visual is available on YouTube at the Michael Experience Podcast. I just want to say that for those of you all that don't know that I've switched to visual too. But that's how we left that situation. And I talk about that journey to get there and what that taught me again about relationships moving forward, specifically my romantic relationships moving forward, because I always had, for whatever reason, sorted relationships with men. I just, and I say relationships, I mean all types of relationships, family, from every variety, friendships of every variety. There just was always something with men that for whatever reason, it just was never as seamless for me, right? And there's other stuff in there that maybe I'll talk about at some other point or you've heard in another episode. But for the purposes of one day at a time, life lessons, love, I wanted to really highlight how at each turn, in each, ending of a relationship or transition in a relationship, it really turned something. It's like it turned a dial inside of me to where I was understanding much more about the people that I interacted with and what my role was in what I accepted and what I got out of it. Because that was the thing. It's one thing to say that my relationship with men was wayward. It's another thing to say, this is how I got here. You know what I mean? I engaged because of this, and this is how I got here. But also in understanding that this is how I get out of it. So, in taking that inventory one by one moment, 1 minute, one day at a time, I finally started getting the clarity. The frustration came first. The sadness came first because it was like, oh my God, I can't realize, I can't believe that I've been sitting with this for so long, but also a relief because I'm like, now I realize why it was, and now I understand what must happen moving forward. And so then there's that. And so I'll go back to what I alluded to for a moment of meeting this guy by happenstance and feeling like it was kismet. So here's the thing, right? Those are two stories, and this last one will be three stories in a series of situations that happened in my meantime for love. And that meantime is really just that place in between, right? Where things happen. But these are just three specific experiences that help to shape where I'm at now. But this last one was a test. This last one was a test. And I talk about how I met him on social media at a time where I wasn't looking, I wasn't anticipating, I wasn't hell bent on having a partner or husband or anything like that. I had let that go, surrendering to what wasn't working because I did the dating around. I did I had the relationship. I was, friendships were falling by the wayside. So people were being removed out of my life that were no longer meant to be there. And that's okay. But this particular person came at a time where I was really just trying to focus on myself and begin to unravel the me behind all of it. Because at some point in your journey, you will get to that place where you say, I've evaluated my relationships with people. And okay, I learned that this is why I allowed them to come into it or whatever. Now, once you start doing those things and unraveling, you have to sit with, okay, so who am I because of it? Who have I become because of it? And that's an even harder pill to swallow because then you're not just now you've replayed your exchanges with them, but now you have to sit with all of the times that you harshly judged yourself, the many times that you dishonored and disrespected yourself by going against your intuition, and everything in between and of that, those things, you realize like I've done myself a real disservice and I've been hard on myself. I haven't loved myself enough, and I also haven't forgiven myself for the things that maybe I knew a little bit of, and maybe I didn't know any of it, and I held myself to this this unattainable expectation. And so now you have to resolve all of those things about yourself and take ownership and accountability for your role in treating yourself bad and allowing yourself to be undervalued in that way. And so, as I was saying, before, there were series that were a series of situationships and happenings, before the last two that I told you about, and in between, sometimes. But and I don't mean in between like during my relationship with the man. I just mean just in between those periods of like dating and seeing people, just everything in between. Stay with me and play with me. And so I get to this space last year where I'm like, you know what? I just need to focus on me. I need to figure me out because what I've understood about my interactions and relationships with others, and it wasn't just men, but predominantly men, especially romantically, I had to say, you know what? I've noticed some things that I got to sit with myself because if this is going on, there has to be so much more beneath the surface that I haven't even scratched. There has to be so much more beneath the surface that I haven't even scratched. And true enough, there was. But as I've taken the moments to digest and taken the moments to work through and be kind to myself and to pour, value and love into myself, the universe always notices and says, you know what? You think you've gotten somewhere. And now we must test your knowledge. Kind of like when you are on a new job or something, or you're in college and you do the thing and you're like, I got it, I think I got it. And then they give you that 10 question, check your knowledge at the end, and you're like, wait a minute, wait a minute, I didn't think the test was gonna come so quickly. The good thing about those is, well, and I guess this is in life too, so I guess I should say that. But if you don't get it right on the first time, you can take it a couple more times before it's like, okay, you didn't get the lesson. Life is a little bit different because you realize very quickly when you've gotten a lesson and when you haven't gotten a lesson. And so mine came in the form of this 6'3", brown skinned man, he dreads. By all accounts, he was a very, very good looking man. He had a winning smile. His voice was just like strength and joy. I talk about it in the book, but he just was so unexpected for me. And I met him on the internet as I was having a live conversation one day on TikTok. And so I met him on there, and I really wasn't going to entertain or engage in conversation with him because I was already on this path of like I'm quieting all of the external noise so I can do the me work. And it's so interesting. Like 2 weeks before I had gotten, because I had gotten off of the internet for a while I did it, because I wanted to unravel without the noise. And this day, I just by chance got on the internet because one of my best friend at the time was here, and we were having a good conversation. He was like, "Well, set up the camera. We'll talk about it on the patio." And so I was like, okay, sure. So we get we get us a beverage, wine and stuff, and then we go out on the patio. I set it up. We start talking, and for some reason, we started talking about business, but then we started talking about like relationship advice to people. And this man jumps in my chat and he's commenting, and I'm not thinking anything of it at first because there are a lot of people that comment in these things. And so, but he's somebody I hadn't seen before. I can typically remember people that have been in my chat engaging before. I get used to the people and then I know who they are. I knew he wasn't anybody that I had interacted with before. And so I look at his profile, there's no picture there. He has no content on his page. So I go back to my conversation thinking, okay, well, he said a couple of things in here. I'm not going to, make anything of it or whatever. But as my conversation is going on, he's back in the chat, right? And he's giving me compliments. And he's like, yo, like, check your DMs and, stuff like that. And I'm like, boy, I'm not listening to you. I made up my mind. I'm not dealing with people on here, but thank you so much, because I had made a vow that I wasn't going to talk to anybody else on social media. Now, it worked with the last guy I was with, but I think that was a fluke or something because I've not yet connected with somebody in a real and meaningful way on the internet again. So I was like, well, maybe, I don't need to do that again. And so I engaged in the conversation with him via the comments, but he was very adamant about me reaching out to him after. And I was like, Lord, are you trying to tell me something? Like, are you trying to tell me something? And so at this point, I had no idea what the man looked like. All I knew is that he was persistent. And I said to myself, all right, and this may have been the FOMO kicking in again, because for whatever reason, I'm like, I don't want to miss my husband because I want one. I don't want to miss my husband. And so I was like, you know what? I'll look at my DMs, whatever, and we'll see or whatever. Now, I was asking him questions in the live and he wasn't answering. So I definitely assumed he wasn't serious. And so I began reading his messages and he answered every one of them in my DMs. And then I think at some point I said, you could be catfish. You don't even have. And so he sent a picture. Now he was very handsome in the picture, very handsome in the picture. And I was like, oh. And then he left his phone number and said, call me or whatever. So I was like, oh, this is why he wanted me to check my DMs. I said, okay, whatever. I checked the DMs. I said, okay, great. I see it. I will, I'll reach out to you maybe later on. Okay. I wasn't planning to reach out to him that night. I really wasn't. But me being me, if I hadn't reached out to him, I would have never gone back to the DM to see, I would have never gone back to the DM. I wouldn't have. I would have forgotten all about it. The people that come in my DMs are a dime a dozen, or were at that particular time, and I just can't field everybody's requests and inquiries. I just can't do it. But um, something told me to reach out to him. I was like, I looked and I looked again and I said, well, let me see. So I reach out to him and we end up having a really good conversation that day. And he's like, okay, well, I know it's late, so I'll let you, you go or whatever, but I definitely want to talk to you tomorrow. And I was like, hmm. But I left feeling really good about him because our conversation seemed so natural and it seemed just to flow, which I hadn't experienced I don't know that I experienced it like that ever, actually. Even with the guy that I was with for 5 years, a little over 5 years, he and I didn't even have that seamless of a connection and communication. So for me, this was a first. And this guy was very much so more masculine in the way that he approached things. And so that was a unique first for me, in having this kind of synergy as well. So I was like, Lord, are you trying to tell me something again? I'm like, are you trying to tell me something? And so I was like, okay, you know what? I'm just gonna see where this goes. And if it doesn't go anywhere, it just doesn't go anywhere. So when I woke up the next morning, I didn't think much of it. I just was like, okay, I'm gonna move about my day or whatever. But that day when I woke up, he had already texted me. I think he might have sent me a voice note that day, or whatever. And I think I texted him back and then he called. And so when he called, I was like, oh my goodness. So he wasn't really a texter. He wanted to get on the phone and talk. And then that evolved to FaceTiming. And so I say this to say, you all, that the situation with him just felt like kismet. He had looking at him drew me in, talking to him, looking at his smile, the way that he reacted to me, in conversation and just everything. I used to tell him this. I said, you have isms when you talk to me. And it's the way that your voice changes when me and you are having a conversation. And it's also how you get lost in my eyes sometimes. Or I see that you are looking at my face, like you are reading my face and getting some type of fulfillment from it. And I noticed it about him very much so from the very first moment that we got on, the FaceTime. And I noticed it, as we continued our rapid or short courtship with each other. I noticed like we would have these conversations. And if he's station if his eyes stayed stationary on me for too long, it's like he would go into this and I would be like, hello, like I'm talking to you. And he would just look and I would be like, you all right? Can I just look at you? And I'm like, oh, okay, cool. But I could always tell when it happens, even after we realized, or I shouldn't say we realized, even after I realized that this wasn't going in the direction that I wanted it or would have hoped that it would go. And we had a couple of conversations after, I still noticed the same thing with him. We would talk on the phone. He would get caught up in the whatever it was, and his isms would kick in. And so the isms is are what kept me kind of confused as to what he was saying versus how his body was reacting to me, because here's the thing, you can hide a lot of things, but the heart knows what the heart knows. And I believe when you are a very spiritual led person and you're a very energetically filled person, for us it can become even harder because you can't hide that. The truth will come out in the energy will reveal the actions, and that will tell you, if you're able to see it, what that truly means. And so for him, I was like, this what he's telling me, and his actions are not making sense. They're just not in alignment. And oftentimes we see that in the reverse. Somebody will say really good things and their actions will tell you that they're not really about those good things. This was the reverse, where when it got down to that point, his actions were saying something much, much different. And it's not as if he was sending me roses or doing something like that to try to confuse me. It was very so much emanating from the inside out. Like, this is what my spirit is calling for. My spirit is telling me to reach you. My spirit is telling me to connect with you, but something between, as I always say, and I say this in the book, the right thing or the answer to what the turmoil is, the inner turmoil is somewhere between your head and your heart. And I say that because somewhere between there, now I'm doing this with my hands and stuff like that to give you a visual, but somewhere in between your head and your heart is spirit. Somewhere between your head and your heart is spirit, I believe, right? And it is sitting in, and it's in there like the central nervous system to help guide you and to align you where your heart and head cannot come to an agreement. And so I was like, and I even expressed to him how I felt, and he said, "No, that's not it." I said, "Okay, all right." But here's the thing, you all. I got really, really attached to him very quickly, and it didn't, that never happens for me. And what I did after that was I went through this debriefing, which felt like it was a long time, at least about a 4 to 6 week debriefing. It felt like just trying to understand, how did this happen to me? I wasn't even supposed to be doing this thing with nobody. I wasn't supposed to be doing this. And here I am looking forward to talking to him, falling asleep on the phone with this man. We're spending time together in his city. Like, how did this even happen? How did I allow myself to get involved when I know that I need to be unpacking? And it was just so tough for me. But the experience pushed me back to self, because all of the questions that I had at this point about my interactions with people, my relationships, particularly with men, they weren't for them. They weren't for them. I didn't have anything to ask them. I feel like I knew what it was. All of the questions that I had led me back to men. And it wasn't a rhetorical question, and it wasn't those conversations with yourself that you have that you don't expect an answer. Sometimes you talk to yourself and it's just like, okay, I just got to get this out. These were conversations where I needed the answers, and the only way I could get them was to go in here and figure it out. And so through that last test, right? Because to me, he showed up as the thing. He showed up as what I would have wanted, in my partner, what I felt like made sense in my partner. And in a lot of ways, maybe, the essence of what he brings to the table and stuff, perhaps that still is somewhere down the line. Not necessarily him, but the attributes somewhere down the line are absolutely that, and this was the universe's way of telling me to get ready for it. But the other thing that it did at the end in the debriefing was push me back to me, even harder than before, even more so than before. And so the test in itself, sure, did I pass it or not? I don't know. Because then I found myself caught up where I said that I wasn't. So in that way, I was like, I don't think I got an A on this test. I might have got a B on it or whatever. Because when I did notice that something was off, I did voice it and I did move on. So when I say we had a short courtship, it was about a month and a half, maybe 2 months in its entirety. Right. So I did somewhere in between there cut it off, but I'm like, how did I get to that place where I wanted to believe and hope that that was something much bigger? And how did I look past the red flags? Because that's something that I hadn't realized about other situations. I looked past so many red flags. I looked past so many red flags. And when I got down to the core of why I looked past the red flags, the answer was astounding. It was desperation. It was desperation. Now I know what you're thinking, Michael. You was desperate for a man. You was desperate for the comfort and the walls of a man. And no, that wasn't it. The men were coming a dime of a dozen. They were lining up. I was desperate for it, right? When we say it, yeah, put it in quotes, capitalize it, italicize it. I was ready for, and I wanted for it to be him. That was the desperation. Because in my mind, I had to look past all of the things that I would normally think unlovable or undesirable, right? And then I decided to pursue love anyway. That was a pivotal moment for me. And that is where I leave this chapter of the book, helping you unravel with me what that looked and what that felt like, and how that progressed me to the next chapter of the book. And so when I say that this book is truly for the people that are learning to give themselves grace, that are learning to love themselves, that are learning to, navigate tough transitions, that is true. And this really speaks to the degrees of separation when life pulls you apart, which is the first chapter of the book. So you all make sure that you go to the michaelexperience.com and you do your order for the book. You will get a signed copy of the book with a personalized affirmation card if you so choose to. You can put that in the notes section what you're going through, something brief. I made it open so that people can say, I'm going through a divorce, I'm trying to navigate my career, whatever you need to get through one day at a time, and you may need affirmation, motivation, or something like that for, that will be on your personalized affirmation card from me, but only at the michaelexperience.com. However, the book is available on Kindle and on Amazon in paperback and hardcover format. If you want to get it there, it just doesn't come with the personal touches. All right. So, what I can leave you with in this moment is, how have the relationships in your life nurtured or held back the person that you were to become? The person that you are to become. I want you to think about that and answer that for yourself. All right. This has been the Michael Experience Podcast. I appreciate you all so much for taking this journey with me and for loving me and my stories, because my stories are a lot of your stories as well, right? And where we meet is the intersection. Go out there and love on yourself before you can love on somebody else. And I will see y'all on the next one. Peace and love, y'all. Bye.